Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Amanda. I'm with Affordable Virginia. We're the folks hosting this Protect Our Checks event today. We're going to hear about Social Security. This is one of 50 events happening nationwide. This year we celebrated the 90th anniversary of Social Security. And we know that it's not just a policy, it is a promise. This is something that all y'all have been paying into since your first job. I got my first job when I was 16. And I hope that Social Security still exists when I'm 65. So we got to do what we can now to keep it solvent. And we've got a few people here today who are going to be able to tell us more about that. All the way to your left, we've got Chris Howard from William and Mary. And he is the Harriman Professor of Government and Public Policy there, where he's worked since 1993. His specialty is the history and politics of U.S. social policy. He's written 4 books, as well as numerous book chapters and journal articles. This is what he talks about for fun. So thank you for being here. Next, we have Sharita Gruberg from the National Partnership. And she is the Vice President for Economic Justice at the National Partnership for Women and Families, where she leads the Economic Justice team in providing expertise and thought leadership in research, advocacy, and policy work to advance an economy that works for all. And then to her left, we have Monty Percival, who is one of our Army vets in this Navy town.
There are 6 of us.
And Kay Ashby, who is with the National Alliance on Mental Health here in coastal Virginia.
I'm going to just say National Alliance on Mental Illness.
What did I say? Okay. National Alliance on Mental Illness, right? Did I? Okay. Y'all, I might need another coffee. I know y'all haven't had all of it yet. It's over there. And then we have Angel Pye, who is here from the SEIU, who will be able to speak to home care workers who are also on Social Security, which we're very excited to hear about. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Bill Robinson, somehow also an Army vet. So give everybody a round of applause.
You got a third of it here.
All right, so today we are excited to release a new report specifically about Social Security here in Hampton Roads and our veterans. And so we'll start with Sharita, who will introduce us to that study. Thank you so much.
Did I turn it off? No. Now it's on. There we go. Hi folks, I'm Sharita with the National Partnership for Women and Families. If you've never heard of us, that's okay. If you have heard of the Family Medical Leave Act, though, you know who we are because that is our baby. And we have been working for 30 years since to try to get paid leave for everybody. And so if I care about paid leave, why am I talking about Social Security? Well, they are all related in terms of baseline things that workers need to thrive. Social Security came about because we needed to take care of our older adults and folks aging out of the workforce. In fact, when Social Security was first proposed, Social Security and paid leave were proposed together because the idea was we needed to support workers when they're ill or raising kids, as well as when they leave the workforce. So these programs are very related for us in the partnership. We got to work with Family Friendly Economy, Affordable Virginia on this report talking about why Social Security has been so important for veterans in Virginia. Over a third of Virginia veterans rely on Social Security. More than 1/3 of Virginia veterans are receiving Social Security. 1 in 7 are women. And so also, even before retirement age, Virginia veterans are using Social Security. 42% of Virginia veterans who are receiving benefits are receiving what's called SSI, Social Security insurance, which is for folks who have a disability and can't work because of their disability. So 42% are getting that. So even before retirement age, it's really important programs for folks. It's also really important for low-income veterans. We have 46% receiving Social Security and 4% receiving SSI. Over half of rural veterans in the state are receiving Social Security, and more than 4 in 10 veterans with disabilities. Without these important, and I hate to call it benefits because it's not something extra, it's something people paid into. It is something that it's like the contract that you made with your government when you started working, that you're gonna get this money back and you're gonna be taken care of. It's really significant for people's monthly well-being, and as costs are skyrocketing, it's more important than ever. The typical monthly Social Security check for a veteran in Virginia is $1,640. A typical Social Security insurance check for disabled folks is $990. If these checks are late or missing, this could be disaster. This translates to 3 months of groceries, a monthly mortgage payment, 5 weeks of rent, nearly 1 year of out-of-pocket medical expenses, 5 weeks of in-home care from a home health aide, or 6 weeks of car payments, gas, things like that. Without these checks, people cannot make ends meet. And so that's why some of the attacks on some of those customer service parts of the Social Security Administration from this administration are so concerning, in addition to the challenges that we're seeing in terms of maintaining Social Security. And so I can hand it back.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that report is going to be available on our website on Monday. So be on the lookout for that, affordablevirginia.org. And then I'd like to hand it over to Chris Howard, Professor Howard. If you could, whatever you tell people at parties, that's what we're here for.
You heard a little bit about my work background. I also want to mention the personal reasons for being here today. I have a great nephew in the Marines, have a great niece who's a helicopter mechanic for the Army. My brother-in-law served in Vietnam. My grandfather and father-in-law served in World War II. So I have both personal and professional reasons to be here. If I seem a little bit distracted, these cameras have me wondering, did I floss this morning? Did I floss? And I'm still not sure. Part of the reason we're here is the 90th anniversary of Social Security. I often talk to my students about sort of the history and development of Social Security. These days, most people think of Social Security as a very large, very important, very popular program. All of those things are true. It did not start out that way. Social Security in the 30s was very controversial. If it had been voted on by Congress as a standalone bill, it probably would have failed. 3 reasons I'll mention right now. It was going to be just involving the national government, not the states. That was a big change. It was going to be paying benefits not just to the poor, but people who weren't poor. That was a big change. And it was going to be organized on sort of social insurance principles with payroll taxes, and somehow benefits would be linked to earnings. And that was also quite foreign to people at the time. Social Security was tiny when it was created. It really didn't have much impact for the first 20 years or so. Eligibility was broadened in the 50s. Benefits were increased in the 60s and 70s. And that's the point when Social Security really became quite important. Between 1960 and 1975, the poverty rate for the elderly in this country was cut by half, right? It went from about 1 in 3 to 1 in 6 or 1 in 7. I consider this one of the great achievements of the 20th century in terms of the national government there. And ever since the 1970s, Social Security has been one of the, if not the most important source of retirement income and the most effective anti-poverty program in the United States. The Census Bureau last year estimated that about 27 million Americans were lifted out of poverty by Social Security. Most of them were older Americans, but not all. The survivors' benefits also help at least 1 million children escape poverty. The survivors and disability benefits help several million working age adults move out of poverty as well. So it's a very important program. Looking forward, there are a number of discussions starting to be held about sort of fixing or saving Social Security because the trust fund is slated to be depleted by about 2033, 2034. We can talk more about specific reforms. I will say, to the extent that you think that public opinion should matter, most Americans, Democrat and Republican, are opposed to across-the-board benefit cuts. Most Americans, Democrat and Republican, are opposed to raising the normal retirement age again. Most Americans, Democrat and Republican, are in favor of lifting the cap on income subject to the payroll taxes. The questions vary as to how far that cap would be lifted, but that's the one item, and this has been true for at least a decade, where you can get people say that's where you ought to get the money. Now, technically, there is no way to fund all of the shortfall that way, but that could get you a long way. I'll also say that we have been in this position before. In the early 80s. The Social Security Trust Fund had less than 2 years left. And there were a number of short-term patches to it. But in 1983, there were a series of amendments to Social Security that pieced together a variety of changes that gave Social Security decades more to live. And so I'm not terribly worried on a technical side of things. Will we be able to solve Social Security or save Social Security? Technically, dealing with Social Security is a heck of a lot easier than healthcare. With healthcare, there are a lot of things that you can suggest changes to where we just don't know exactly how much is that going to help. With Social Security, it's a lot easier to figure out how much benefit various changes would do for the trust fund.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to Angel from the SEIU. You can keep that one.
That's good. Oh, you have another.
Good afternoon. You have to talk like right in it.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. There you go.
Good afternoon. As was stated, my name is Angel Pye, and I am a member of SEIU 512. I am also one of the executive board members, and my background before becoming a home care worker was in mental health. Why this is so important to me today is because my grandfather fought in the Korean War.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
My grandfather fought in the Korean War. And as you all know, African Americans, he was one of those first ones to be able to fight for this country in the Navy. I have 3 brothers who fought in the Vietnam War. And my younger brother, he was a Marine. He is now working, I call him top flight security of the world because we know that there's a building that he goes to every day and none of us can go in it. We can just drop him off and that's it. And numerous other people in my life benefit and fought for this. And now you're saying that you want to cut this program or arrange it to where there's service. They did 2 things. Veterans do 2 things. They serve and fight and do everything that you tell them to do for this country in the name of God and country, and then family. And then most of them leave the military and they go off to have other careers to basically do the same thing in civil service. 400,000 veterans this year lost their jobs because Douglas Collins does not want unions. 120,000 of those people are public servants. A quarter of those end up having to be home care providers. So not only do they serve the country, work, then they have to go back in and take care of their loved ones and make sure that they are taken care of. And even though the VA has a program, it won't be funded if this is taken away. It won't be funded. So not only are you losing your benefits, but you're losing your care for not only yourself, but for your loved ones. Because a lot of veterans need someone in their homes to help take care of them, or they end up out on the streets. And so when you see these men and women who have signs that says veteran, homeless, understand is the breakdown in our system. Where you have fought for this country, you have provided a service, you've forsaken a lot of things, and you can't even get care. You won't even hire people so that they can process your paperwork, so that you can receive your benefits. And then you have to wait hours and hours when you do go to the VA to get the care that you need. Social Security will not have the people on the phones to take your questions and answer them. They want you to now come in, but they're closing down Social Security satellite offices. So now, and I know everybody in this room sees the snowball effect. And we come back to unions, home care workers, and just as the gentleman was saying, yes, we're still good, but if these services are not still in place, we're gonna have an increase of homelessness, even worse than what it already is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but with the the disability, your Medicaid is contingent upon that. If you are disabled, then you qualify for Medicaid. So if you cannot get disability, then you don't qualify for Medicaid. So then what do you do for health care? What do you do for your home? You look at your home care, your family member who provides your home care, and you say, I can no longer pay you because Medicare is going to be struggling to cover these costs. Franklin Roosevelt, and one of the questions that we have is that, what do we do? Franklin Roosevelt, when he started this program, he put a fall safe in it. He stated that he intentionally chose a payroll tax mechanism to fund Social Security, believing that workers contributing to the system would gain a strong sense of ownership and entitlement to their benefits, making it difficult for future administrations to dismantle the program. This is not a social program. Veterans, civilians pay into this program, and you get back what you paid into it. Why is there an issue? There should not be an issue as to what happens to this. We just need to look at our workforce, because people can't work. There are no jobs. So we don't have enough people to pay into it and keep it going. It's not the veterans. It's not the people who have already worked and paid into it. So why should they be punished for our poor lack of budgeting as a government? And we have people who are sitting back and they're co-signing robbery. They are co-signing robbery. And you say, oh, well, they do. They need to be prosecuted. And that too, because a lot of people are going to die. So I want you to be angry. I want you to be angry, but I also want you to look at, okay, what do I do with my anger? Because me as a home, my son, I provided care for my son. His father was in the Navy. And I share this story because we were a young family. And we were on food stamps and Medicaid. And he was in the military during 1988. And I had to go down there and ask people for help. Nobody that served this country should ever have to go and get Medicaid, food stamps, or any type of handout. Your service entitles you and your family to be taken care of. I don't care if you're E1, E2, E3, all the letters. You should not have to have your family go out and ask for help in that manner. That is, and then when they die, as a partner, a wife, a family member, you have to wait months and months for your paperwork to be cleared so that you can get your benefits. Social Security. And it's supposed to be expedited. Remember that, and it's in writing. It's in writing. Here it is. It's in writing on their website. Expedited. It's not. You wait months. What do we do with this? What do we do with our anger? What do we do with our dissatisfaction? And this is not a partisan, this is a people, not bipartisan, none of that. This is people, this is humanity. It's not black, white, green, purple, Jewish, Catholic, Buddhist, LGBTQ, it's none of that. It is people who have served this country, and now you want to cut their livelihood. And there are more poor veterans than there are well-off veterans. We just don't see as many of them because they hide themselves. Because don't you understand, they're ashamed too. Because they fought for something and they were sold a bill of goods. And when they finished and they walked away, they got nothing. They got nothing. So, home care for veterans is in danger if these cuts go through as well. And the population of elderly, and not only elderly, because people often think that home care just encompasses older people, children. A lot of children are being born with disabilities now, and they are in these families, they are in veterans' families. This is a part of their help. We cannot idly, and you all are, and I thank you for being here, and I thank you for listening, and I know that when you leave here, you're going to go out and you're going to talk to people that maybe you may be a little uncomfortable in talking to, but you will talk to them because something in you provokes you to a point that you will say to yourself, I'm not going to allow my country to continue to go down this road. You all have done too much for this country for that to happen. What are we leaving? What are we leaving behind? If our veterans fought for this, will we allow their fight and their lives and the ones who are no longer here? And we have two wonderful Army vets who are sitting here with us, and those of you who are out in the audience. We do not want what you have done for us to be in vain. That would be a sin within itself. So we're gonna do the uncomfortable. We're gonna have the uncomfortable conversations. We're gonna ask the uncomfortable questions. And we're gonna hold the people that we voted for in office accountable. And if they will not be accountable, guess what? They have to look for new jobs. And maybe we can do something to make sure that we take their retirement, their benefits to supplement what's being taken away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. My uncle was a Vietnam vet, and he was homeless, and he suffered from schizophrenia, and my mom spent decades of his life and her life jumping through hoops to make sure that he could get into the VA and that he was getting his Social Security checks. He preferred to be homeless, but he would have his Social Security checks sent to our house. And my mom would go and pick him up in Northern Virginia at the Springfield Library. They would go and cash his check. She would bring him home, and he would shower and shave, do some laundry, and then drop him back off at the library. When we got here this morning, we were here a little bit early before the library opened, and I know that there were some people like my uncle who were waiting for those doors to open. So this is personal for me too, and I really appreciate everything that we've heard so far. I'd like to go ahead and open up the discussion, and I'd like to hear from our vets up here, as well as Kay, about your personal experiences with Social Security, and how your family and your peers have been impacted. So we'll start here on the left with Bill.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Bill Robinson. I served 23 years in the United States Army as an infantry officer. I was in Afghanistan 3 times, and I went back again as a DoD civilian. I served 20 years as a DoD civilian. My father was also an Army veteran. He first went to Vietnam in 1964, and he also served in Korea. My father died in 2023. His lungs literally were scarred so badly from the fumes. He was an artilleryman. From the fumes he had started inhaling, working in the early self-propelled artillery, and he would be inside the turret as a safety officer, because he's got a safety officer on each turret, in each gun, that had scarred his lungs, and when he got older, something triggered them to start contracting, and he literally just suffocated, because his lungs got to the point where they couldn't provide enough oxygen to the rest of the body, which caused his body to fill up with, his abdomen to fill up with fluid, because his heart was working so hard, and he would go into a death spiral, and eventually he couldn't recover from it. What we learned from his experience, and what I've learned from the experience of others, is your benefits aren't one nice neat package you get from the VA. When the appropriators look at what you need to survive as a veteran, as a disabled veteran, etc., they look at all the different programs that are out there, and they add up across the program. So that doesn't just include your direct Veterans Administration benefits. They account for everything. That includes your Social Security, your Medicare, your Medicaid, if you're eligible for it, and HUD grants if you're homeless and trying to get back into housing. administration has started to attack by multiple means all of those things. And that's where we're starting to see impact. The HUD grants, for example, under the Doge, they fired all the loan processors. So homeless veterans can't get the vouchers that would allow them to get into permanent housing so they can hold their job. So you have veterans that are they've gotten sober, they've gotten their mental health issues resolved to the point that they can go back to work. But if you know anyone that's been homeless, if you're living in temporary housing, a shelter, or worse, on the street, you spend all your time just surviving. It's almost impossible to hold a job. The HUD grants pay their first and last month's rent deposit. They paid their actual rent by having a job and paying their rent. Without the processors, they can't get those vouchers, can't get a deposit, can't get an apartment. What does that mean? Well, they're still homeless, but it's because, as you heard, as part of the whole big, I call it big BS budget, they want to, claw that money back and spend it on other things like more ICE agents, border patrol, this and that. Another thing they don't tell you is that, and we heard about the heroes that are home care workers. My parents required a lot of assistance. They would fall a lot. They needed pretty much round-the-clock care because they had oxygen. They had to take oxygen, especially my father, etc. And obviously, I couldn't be by their side 24/7, 365. Well, that's not covered by Medicare. That's covered by Medicaid. What people don't realize is that the VA doesn't cover all of that because they assume you will get Medicaid. The majority of people in nursing homes or on home health care depend on Medicaid. It's not just for the poorest of the poor. That's just the way our system is worked. So what will happen as Medicaid is cut back is people will basically be thrown on the mercy and ability of their friends and family, and all those veterans that are employed as healthcare workers will lose their jobs when those homes that are those facilities or homes that were paying them to be healthcare workers fold, or they lose their positions. So now we have more out-of-work veterans. So there's, again, it's part of the whole package. And then if Social Security benefits get cut, they have even less, because when they figure your veterans benefits, especially for disabled veterans, they calculate your veterans benefit based on also how much Social Security you will get. So if your Social Security goes down, your total livable wage, if you will, is going down. So all of this is critical. Now, my father passed away before all these risks came into place. But that's all at risk now. And we've just seen the tip of the iceberg. They're going to get away with everything we've got. And I will ask one question. How many of you live in Congressional District 02? Do you know? That means Virginia Beach,
District. Anybody?
Chesapeake.
Those hands up high.
Yeah. Suffolk, Eastern Shore. If you were in that district, just remember, there were promises made that have already been broken.
You're going to see that commercial in fact. No.
Promises have been made that have already been broken. So I would ask you this: when somebody makes you more promises, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So my last bit of advice that I've learned is I was late is I was helping stand up canvassing for a local election for the state House of Delegates. Virginia needs to stand up. We saw how California is standing up. We've seen some governors standing up. The administration went after California. They've gone after Washington, D.C. They are looking for opportunities to suppress the states. They've also started trying to get voter rolls from the states. You remember we had a purge in 2024. With federal help, it'll be worse. So I would ask you, don't just listen, tell somebody else.
Yes.
After you tell somebody, go do something. When you go do something, take a friend. This election is just as important as the next election, because Virginia, everybody calls it a bellwether, but we got to become a bulwark too. We got to be a brick in the wall against the forces that want to take away our constitutional rights. They want to take away what we've earned, over the course of our lifetime, what we earned in our sacrifices as veterans, what we need to survive. So we can't afford to wait. We can't afford to wait. And with that, I'll say thank you for being here. Thank you for all you've done. And I'm glad to be here with my brothers and sisters.
And so I have a few questions that I want to make sure that we have the time to get to. So I'd like to open up that question to Monty and Kay. So again, how has Social Security impacted you and your peers, and especially for Monty after their military service? And y'all should have another mic down there.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I hope you can hear me. I'm being accused of having a loud voice. I want to paint a quick background. Yes, I'm 30 years Army, E9 on that scale. Retired Sergeant Major. Part of my service, part of my 30 years service, included 3 years behind the Iron Curtain in a city surrounded by a wall. And that city happened to be 40 years prior to my arrival. That was the nexus of a regime that tried to build Der Dritte Reich, the Third Reich, a great society, if you will, a great realm, a great kingdom, and they did it by targeting the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable. And in the nearly 40 years since I left Berlin in '88 and came here to live in Virginia Beach, in fact, and have lived here since, except for a 2-year break. During my time behind the Iron Curtain, I became interested, deeply immersed, and if you will, a student of that time in history, because I was living there. I've stood on the ruins of Gestapo headquarters. My wife heard gunfire when a young man was shot and killed trying to come across the Berlin Wall in '87. So the history of World War II was palpable to me, because I could read about it and say, well, yeah, that's 6 blocks from where I'm living right now. But that, if you will, is sort of my genesis, my epiphany, although I didn't realize it at the time. In the ensuing years, this must be a directional microphone, because it gets real loud when you get close to it. Leaving Berlin, I came here to serve and spent a lot of that time in Virginia Beach. 13 of my 30 years in the Army were spent here in Virginia Beach. Since retiring from the Army in 2005, I've spent the past 20 years as a contractor to the U.S. government, developing training. I'm an instructional systems designer. I've done that for Department of Defense, U.S. Navy, for NATO. I spent 5.5 years at the FBI Academy, developing training at the FBI Academy. And the past 6 years here back home in Virginia Beach, I work in military intelligence on Dam Neck. My most recent work was developing training for Army field artillery. By the way, there, sir, you mentioned artillery earlier. My point being that I have been in contact with the history of despotic governments, regimes. I've also had great opportunity to touch the intelligence side of the military community. And with my 5.5 years at the FBI Academy, I have had in-depth contact with law enforcement as well as national security. And what I've come to recognize, building on that epiphanal moment you could say that I said I had when I arrived in Berlin, is I am witnessing a regime. That's what it is. And I'm not going to, sergeants major don't often use euphemisms. It's a regime. And they're trying to build that regime on the back of the most vulnerable. Personally speaking, I'm not being hurt that bad. I'm not. I have a dang good pension. I have a good job. Well, actually, I'm between jobs because my job suddenly went away. I'm okay though. But what I am realizing is too many people focus only on how it hurts them personally. And we have to expand the scope of what we realize. An adage in the military is you take care of your soldiers, you take care of your troops, you take care of those around you. I know many of my associates and friends who are not in the good position I'm in. So I'm more able to step out and try to do something even if I don't know exactly what that's going to be when I walk out the door. Then I have family members. I have grandnieces and nephews who rely on Social Security because their mother died. I have other family members who have medical conditions that will prevent them from ever again being able to work. The most vulnerable are being targeted. And we've moved well past that point of keeping our damn mouths shut. And I don't know what I'm going to do about it except just keep ringing the bell and voting. And when these signs are available, I'm going to be one of the guys putting Spanenberger signs around Virginia Beach. Because I called Sean Montanaro, the head of the Democrat Party here at Virginia Beach. I said, Sean, I'm seeing Sears signs all over the place, and I'm tired of seeing them. When are we going to get ours? Because I have a Ford Ranger, and we can put a bunch of signs in my truck, and I'll put out the signs. All I can do is chip away at what part of the mountain I'm able to touch. But it's not me chipping away, it's all of us working together. Find that little niche, or is it a niche? And find your way to contribute. Because the more people who step up, and people say, well, how's it hurting you? It ain't hurting me that much. But boy, I sure know a lot of people that it is hurting and that it's going to hurt. Expand the breadth of your vision. I really didn't know I was going to be sitting up here this morning, but thanks, thank you.
So I'm going to be brief. I'm Kay Ashby, and I'm here in several capacities. One of them I hadn't even thought about until I got here. I am the wife of a DOD officer from Vietnam era who died 2 years ago, who has Agent Orange disability, which he never applied for, but his friend told me to, so I now do get that. He never felt he was worth it. Get it? That's really what he died of. But I'm also here on behalf of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We really are concerned about any changes in this legislation because it's going to affect our members who live on Medicare and Medicaid. And as many of you may or may not know, at least 60% of the homeless live with a mental health and or addiction. And so we're going to see more of them. We need those services. I'm on a Virginia Beach Development Corporation's board. We're about to build the first in this area's combined housing of attainable housing and 9 dedicated mental health units, which I've so excited about. But I'm really here to talk to you about my daughter, who lives with bipolar disorder. She fortunately had worked 40 eligible quarters, so she was able to get SSDI. And she's lived with that. She works for an organization called Eggleston. They work with people with disabilities. She's worked with them since 2016. It's the first time in her life that she's gotten vacation and, sick leave. She makes $18 an hour, which does not sound like a lot of money, but she's got to be careful because we got a letter in February saying that in July of 2022, and this is February of 2025, that she had earned too much money and she was going to lose her disability.
Yeah.
My daughter has a job coach. That job coach and she sent a letter back to Social Security, and the letter said, we recently reviewed the evidence in your disability claim and found that your disability is continuing. So she didn't lose it. But what she has to do is get her paychecks to Social Security every month. My daughter has a car. She doesn't have a family. She lives with me. She's pretty good about remembering things, but her mother's really good about remembering things. And she can sit for 4 hours, as she did on Monday, to wait for them to take her checks, because I'm afraid to put them in the mail, especially with all the cuts. There were 2 people at Social Security on Monday. Tim told me about 2 families, one woman with 3 children, can you imagine that? And one man with 2 children. Again, can you imagine sitting for 4 hours with children, little children? And if you hadn't gotten there in time, Kim's job ends at 10:30. She works early, she works on Oceana Base in one of the galleys there. So she's off by 10:30. She could get there in time. People that work, Social Security closes at 4 o'clock. So you either take off from work or you go there. She just got a letter. So that letter that said her claim was okay, it was May 12th. In July, she got a letter saying, I didn't believe it. As part of our payroll information exchange, PIE, we are not now receiving wage and employment information about you from your employer, Louise W. Eggleston Center, and therefore you do not have to send your paychecks in anymore. I have to tell you, it scares me to death to not do it, but we're gonna try that this time. But my daughter has so many things that many people don't have. And if you're someone who is military living with mental health issues, or anyone living with mental health issues, a lot of times you've broken all your bridges. Your family can't help you, they don't understand. And to remember to, after work, one of your many jobs, and it may not be a company like Eggleston, but it may be somebody where you're working 2 or 3 jobs, and you have to turn those paychecks in to prove that you're working the adequate number of hours to continue to get your benefits. Just think about it. Even if you don't live with a mental illness, it's pretty damn hard to remember that. So, that's my story. I think that Kim's story just encapsulates what can happen going forward as we cut back the number of people at Social Security, but mostly as we just cut back those supports. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. I would like to pass the mic down to Chris and Sharita. If you guys could maybe share a little bit about the misconceptions around Social Security and the policy changes and protections that we could put in place to protect it for future generations.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback off of what you were talking about. So, the number of hoops that your family's going through, the number of hoops they make everyone go through to access benefits, especially if you're disabled, when the reality is fraud is basically non-existent. It is less than 1% of claims. Right, who would bother for this much? On the other hand, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg just got all the audits of their companies who get plum federal contracts amounting to billions and billions of dollars dropped. Every audit into these companies from the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs to make sure they're complying with laws prohibiting contractors from discriminating against veterans, those audits have been dropped. Okay? So when we're thinking about where the fraud is, where the waste is, where the abuse is, it's always the people who are struggling to make ends meet, struggling to do the right thing, who have served their country, who are under the magnifying glass, while these billionaires get to take our tax dollars with zero oversight or accountability and don't have to follow the rules because the rules aren't being enforced for them. So that's one of the misconceptions. There basically is not fraud. However, they're treating folks like criminals. It's been mentioned kind of the processing times, the staff time shuttering. The latest estimate is you have one Social Security Administration staff person serving 1,480 beneficiaries, okay? And it's gonna get worse as DOGE keeps closing offices and firing people. There are plans to shutter tens of thousands of field offices. It's already nearly impossible to get your benefits. If you're applying for supplemental security income because you're disabled, 236-day average processing time. Who has 236 days to wait for the money you need to pay your rent, buy food? Over 1 million people are waiting for their appeals. People die waiting for their appeals. The National Bureau of Economic Research estimates a 13% drop in disability benefits when an office is closed. This is intentional. When they're closing an office, it is a benefit cut. They intend for you not to get your benefits when they cut staff, when they cut these supports.
They
So,
want you to get frustrated and not show up.
And I just want to add,
You gotta turn it off, yeah.
I just want to add on something I didn't mention. The real benefit for my daughter with getting Social Security is the fact that mental health medicine costs $1,000 a month. And if she doesn't get Social Security, she doesn't get Medicare. And that would kill her. And she's not alone. That's so normal. The medicines are so expensive.
Just turn it up, yeah.
I think a lot of Americans and a lot of policymakers think incorrectly of the elderly as a privileged class. You've got Social Security, you've got Medicare, you all have already eaten at the trough. Why are you asking for more? And I don't think people realize just how economically diverse older Americans are. I live in Williamsburg, and yes, there are people retired, living in gated communities, playing golf twice a week, and when they go out to eat, they do consider, maybe I'll order the steak. But there are lots of other people who are either poor or just rather close to the poverty line. And there is, I think, a good argument in the next round of changes to Social Security to say, I don't think the debate should be just share the pain, right? That there is, in fact, an argument for increasing benefits for some Social Security retirees. High, personally on my list, would be single individuals over the age of 80. Right? Their poverty rates are actually greater than the national average. Many of them, their private savings or company retirement pensions have gone by then. Their out-of-pocket medical expenses are getting high by then. A number of them are just in economically fragile positions. And I think we could and should do better by some of our older, especially older and single retirees. And that we shouldn't just have the debate as whose benefits are going to be cut, whose taxes are going to be raised. That's the share the pain game. I think it's also, well, there's opportunities here to do right by folks who are actually leading pretty marginal lives financially. And we ought to take a better look at them and not think that the elderly are all playing golf and eating lobster.
What Chris just said about our society. A philosopher once said that you can tell, and I'm paraphrasing, the quality of a society by the way that they treat their poor. We're the greatest country in the world, so we say. So what does this, what is happening now, say about us as a country? And I like what you said about not playing that game of, poverty versus. Because understand, a lot of people are working. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. They have very good careers. I know a lot of clinicians and professors who are the old adage, one paycheck away from poverty, because your cost of living, your housing is more than the 40% standard that they claim is the average. You all have been to the store. This water used to be 50 cents. It is now $1, maybe even $2 now. A lot of people who are working, and I say this every time, we have working poor.
Yes.
You're working to be poor. So it's not about, and yes, there are lots of people, I know a lot of people who are doing well for themselves. They made the right decisions. They invested in the right things. They did everything right. And then there were the other group who they did everything right, and life happened.
Yeah.
They got divorced. So that income was gone. She was left with the children. She hadn't worked in 20 years. She doesn't have any skills. So now she has to get job skills and find a job because that income is gone. His wife died. He's left with the 3 children. And one of them has a disability. So he has to go to work every day and figure out how this disabled child is going to be taken care of. That is now getting ready to turn 18. So their income will no longer be able to cover that child. They won't be able, and then once they get, what is it now, 25? Where you can cover them, 26? So then they'll be moving into 26 and their insurance no longer covers them. So how do they get the health care and the benefits that they need? So we're not going to allow them to divide us into pointing fingers of, well, you just didn't make right decisions. You just didn't do this. No, as the children say, life is lifing. And it is taking a lot of people down who need help. We see this every time we have a natural disaster. I remember Katrina. People were waiting for the government. They were waiting. But then there were people like you and I, everyday people, who were getting in their cars, loading up U-Hauls, going down to New Orleans, and we were passing out water, we were taking contractors, finding wood, nails, whatever we could, and helping people build shelters. Understand the power of we. Us as a people. When something needs to be done, we roll up our sleeves. We don't look at who you are, what you have, because remember the fires out there in California. A lot of rich people lost their homes, and their insurance policies were cut the month before. They still had means to be able to get somewhere else to stay, but they had to live in somebody else's shoes for a couple of days and a couple of weeks before they could access that money. So in understanding that, we know that as a people, we are the only ones that are going to save us. By us working and pulling together, as my mother would say. We got to pull together. We pull our resources, we pull our senses, we pull everything that we have to let this government know that we are still a government by the people and for the people. We are not a plutocracy, we are not run by the rich, and we will not continue to serve your purpose. You will take care of the people that voted for you. What Ms. K said, you sit in the Social Security office, you get there at 9 o'clock, and you're still, and mind you, if they take lunch at 12, you're still sitting there. They don't take anybody else after 3:30. And then at 4:30, if you still, they'll tell you, oh, well, if you haven't been seen, as long as you're in here. But then you're rushed. You're tired. Your child is yelling and screaming. So you get up and leave. Mm-hmm. Mind you, also, child care is a part of this as well. Veterans, civilians, everyone needs child care. That's on the chopping block too.
It's already been.
Yeah.
All those boys and girls clubs that do before and after child care, all that's been cut.
It's done. And home care hours have been cut. So if your loved one needs around-the-clock care, they'll only cover 16 hours of care a day. And you can't use your respite hours. You get the allotted hours that the nurse says you need for care, and then you get 450 respite hours. Respite hours are hours that you use, say like you have a doctor's appointment, or you go to school, or you have to get another job, because remind you, a home care worker in this state on Consumer Direct only makes $13 and some change an hour. Agencies may make a tad bit more now, but not as much. So if you have a loved one who needs 24-hour care, how is it going to be paid for, and who's going to provide it? Because the need for home care is here, and the pool of workers is here. So there is a real gap in care and mental health. And Ms. K can speak to this. Mental health is struggling to keep up. People are jumping ship because money is not there. You're working and you're attending to the mental needs of people, and it goes back to our veterans who you did the job, and now you're in a place where you need help. Shame, depression, that leads to alcoholism, drug use, and suicide. Yes, there's a lot. Yes, there is a lot. There are so many things that need to be done, but I really am going to keep hope that there are so many of us, the people, we will continue to move together to create change, a lasting change, holding this administration, even though, God, we're only 8 months in.
The pace is you know, it was all predictable, not the pace.
And that's it. You saw it on the writing on the wall, but it was like you blinked and everything happened. And right now, as we're speaking, more is happening. And we cannot allow the divide and conquer to happen. Understand, propaganda is real. You know, they say they got rid of the Krill Committee back in the 1990s, but the blueprint and the book is still being used. Let's not allow ourselves to be used. Let's be mindful that this is history repeating itself. We're seeing it in real fast forward time.
If I may, the Jews are destroying the world. The only way I can lose the election is if it's stolen. It's the same playbook.
It is.
The details are different, but it's the same playbook.
One other point I'd like to make is, I talked earlier about how, it's all an integrated plan and you're pulling the structures out. One of the critical things that helps us get our benefits are the various kinds of service officers. When you leave the service, depending on where you are, you should have been sent to a service officer who helps you sit down and know how to get your benefits when you first get out. Sometimes they're an employee of BLD, sometimes they're provided by one of the veterans organizations, sometimes they're provided by the VA. Then once you get out and go home, wherever you go, there are service officers, some under the American Legion, some under the BFW, and then some are under the state of Virginia. Over in Hampton, for example, I think they have one here in Virginia Beach too. They have a state of Virginia Veterans Office. Well, the federal funding that was going to the veterans organizations and the state of Virginia funding for the veterans offices is already being cut. So those organizations have had to stop providing the veterans, and the ones that have gone first were the ones that went out into the rural areas like I am, that would show up on one day a week to help the rural veterans with their claims, show them how to access those more difficult benefits, help them realize benefits they hadn't received that they could receive, from other agencies. So again, and thank you for reminding me, they want to claw back money by having people not apply for it. So then they can say, we don't need to budget for it in the next budget. So it's a vicious cycle. So this is why it's so important to get involved in every election, this year, next year. So thank you for reminding me about that, and just remember that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Chris.
So we need to wrap things up, but I do want to hear just one more thing. Chris, if you could tell us what we should be advocating for, how do we keep it solvent, what are those policy changes that need to be made to protect Social Security going forward?
Well, the first place to start, I think, is raising the cap on income subject to the payroll tax. In the early 80s, when Social Security was in trouble, about 90% of all income in the economy was subject to the payroll tax. It's now about 83%. So one small fix would just, well, let's put it back to the way it was around 1980 under Reagan, and we'll then sort of move from there. That would bring in a substantial amount of money. A second thing, and this is not necessarily a popular notion, but the usual threshold for Social Security is make the program solvent for the next 75 years, okay? That's a very high bar. We don't go to the Pentagon and say, whatever you guys are doing on submarines, make sure they're gonna keep us safe for the next 75 years, right? We don't tell NASA, whatever those expensive rockets are, make sure they're working for the next 75 years. So I think one way of making the problem more tractable, and it's morally defensible, is saying, well, what can we do to get Social Security another 40 to 50 years of life, right? Every generation is going to face some challenges and make some adjustments. We're going to make some now, but we're not necessarily fair to be on the hook for the next 75 years. So I think that would be a reasonable way of talking about it. More broadly, I think we have learned over the last 50 years that cutting social programs directly is very difficult, all right? So the indirect strategies involved eroding the tax base, and this is the strategy of starve the beast, which involves sort of repeated cuts to income taxes, property taxes, estate taxes, et cetera, to try to make it difficult to finance social programs. So one of the things we need to do is talk about where that revenue is going to come from and who has been benefiting from big cuts in income taxes and wealth taxes over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Okay? The Doge cuts are another sort of indirect way of starving the beast by taking away people that provide essential services for Social Security, and particularly for anybody dealing on the disability side of things, because that's when you have a lot of effort to prove that you are and remain to be disabled, et cetera. We need for both Social Security and the IRS to have enough people there to do the work. Because for a lot of them, it's very valuable work. It's work that more than pays for itself in the case of people like IRS auditors. But we've got to realize that finding the revenue is really important, and making it clear that not just billionaires, I know Elon Musk has a very punchable face, but it's not just billionaires, but it's billionaires and millionaires and companies that barely pay any taxes at all. There's a whole bunch of folks out there that are sitting on an enormous pot of money that who could be called upon to help finance government, and whose lives are not going to be materially affected in any sort of significant way.
And you said we've done this before. This isn't anything new that we're asking for, right?
Right, so I mean, we have saved quote unquote Social Security in the early 80s. We've made adjustments in other times before then. But the whole tenor, Reagan, Bush, Trump, has been eroding our tax base in a number of ways. And there are enough small tax cuts for moderate income people that they can say that they're broadly available. But if you look at the dollar amounts, if you look at the percentage savings, et cetera, they're heavily weighted towards the haves in society. And the whole bit this year about reverse Robin Hood was absolutely correct in terms of who was actually getting the tax cuts and who was actually paying the price for Medicaid cuts, SNAP cuts, other cuts, et cetera. And I think there needs to be an emphasis on that reverse Robin Hood, and that we need to sort of undo a lot of the damage that has been done to our revenue base over the last 30, 40 years.
A question, if I could, for you on one of your comments, if that's all right. On raising the cap, you know, everybody supports it. There's been problems with the funding for a while. Why hasn't it been done? What is the argument against it, and who's putting that argument out there?
Right, so, part of the puzzle is the cap was lifted for Medicare years ago, and it's not like rich people all fled to the Cayman Islands, right? So part of the argument is that if you do that, because the Social Security benefit structure is progressive, the replacement rate is better for lower income workers than higher income, that if you lift the cap, that rich folks will say, I want to opt out of Social Security completely. I don't understand why we're having this, and this is a bad investment for me, okay? And I think part of the story is you've got to sort of ask yourself, is Social Security purely an investment, or is it also an insurance program, right? In case things don't work out for people at the end of their lives. And I think it's helpful to think of it partly as an insurance program and to say to yourself, do you put a lot of money into homeowners insurance and say, damn it, just once I wish the house burned down, right? Then I would have collected. I paid a lot of money for car insurance, damn it, I wish I had just totaled the car twice to get my money back. Right? For some people who are quite affluent, I think you say, well, it was an insurance program in case things didn't work out. You've got an enormous amount of private savings and company retirement, et cetera. You got lucky here. You were quite fortunate here. You may not get back as much from Social Security as you thought, but in a good society, the lucky take care of the unlucky. Right? That's sort of one of the guiding principles that I think a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people would agree on. But I think back to your question, it's the sense that the rich folks would start asking to opt out of Social Security completely. And that's the fear.
You can opt out of Social Security?
Well, they would push for exclusions.
Oh, go ahead, Sharita, and then we'll take one question and come back and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, just wanted to add to revenue. In 2022, undocumented immigrants paid $26 billion into Social Security. They weren't taking it out though. Like even if you have somehow acquired a Social Security number and you're undocumented, you're not gonna get a benefit. It doesn't work that way as a former immigration attorney. Like I can promise you that. And so like, you know, I'm in the occupied federal territory of DC right now where we actually like see ICE scooping people off the streets. And so what's happening is like you're having fewer folks paying in. We have a lot about, you know, Trump and JD Vance want to force women to have more babies, but not actually make it any easier to have kids. And that's their solution to our aging nation that doesn't have enough workers paying in. But like the reality is strong immigration policies that actually like give us the workers and the folks that we need paying in are another avenue for helping to ensure the solvency of these programs. Instead, for reasons that I cannot comprehend other than just like basic racism, they are eroding a lot of the folks paying into these programs, a lot of the supports that we need to continue it.
And I've asked that question because we've had a lot of out in California, we've had a lot of our home care workers and housekeepers. There's a housekeeping unit, service unit. They have been detained by ICE. And they have their papers. One of the presidents out there, he was detained, and luckily we got him out. But that was one of the misconceptions, that immigrants are coming here and they're getting benefits and they're living high off the hall, and it's like, no, they're paying in, but they don't get anything. So thank you so much.
And I just want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask your question.
Sure, thank you. This week we heard the Attorney General of the United States of America say that in D.C., the District of Columbia, the capital of our country, the homeless will go to shelter or they will go to jail. Direct quote. So I have two questions about that, which are probably unanswerable. First, go to shelter where? Choice aside, and some people make that choice, there is not enough shelter for people who are homeless in DC or in anywhere in this country. And then my second question is, go to jail for what? It is not a crime to be homeless. It is not a crime to exist. And it is not a crime to exist without a roof over your head. So if you can answer that, please do, because I've been pondering it all week.
I can answer this one. Okay, I'm not sure it's going to reach.
When I was in the 82nd Airborne, this is the one we would have said, make your buddy smile. I can answer both parts of that question. One, if you're like my generation, and probably this, your generation too, I'm a voracious reader, and I'm sure a lot of y'all are. There was an article this morning about Dallas, Texas, has achieved the point that they have been assessed as having solved their homeless problem. The way they did it was what's called a pipeline to permanence. In other words, whenever they identify someone as homeless, their process for dealing with them doesn't end until they've got them in a permanent housing situation. No temporary shelter is good enough, etc. Even if that means that if they're mentally ill, they are in permanent care. Whatever it takes to get their situation dealt with on a permanent basis. And they just said because they realize this is the only way to solve the problem. Because if you put somebody in a temporary shelter, even if it's available, at some point they're going to have to leave, and you haven't solved their problems, and they're back on the street. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're on the street, all you can do is survive. You're not going to go get a job because you're trying to find food. You're trying to make sure your few remaining possessions are safe. You're trying to do whatever you can. You're fighting off mental illness. If you go homeless and you aren't mentally ill, you're probably going to suffer the trauma that causes you to become mentally ill. You're going to be physically abused, mentally abused, etc. So, what they're doing up there is they're just pushing people into the shelters, including the veterans, until they max the capacity, and then they're going to try to export them to other cities and do the same thing. And at some point, they're going to run out of buses and shelters. Okay? There are actually cities and conservative courts and conservative states have ruled that you can criminalize vagrancy and homelessness. And what they've criminalized is the act of sleeping on the streets. You can be arrested, and then what they do is after you spend your whatever amount of time in jail, they take you outside the city and say, come back and we'll do it again. Now, it's stupid because what people do, they go, oh, you put me in jail, you'll have to feed me, et cetera, et cetera. So they get a different kind of homeless, the guys that don't mind being locked up. But again, that's their solution. We will arrest you if you are homeless. Then they can give them fines if they can't pay their fine and court costs and all this, so they go to jail for more and more time. They end up permanently incarcerated. So what do you end up with? Guys who are just as happy to get shelter inside, they'll end up going to jail and say, okay, I'm in jail. I was victimized on the street. I'll be victimized in here. But you also end up with people who have nowhere else to go, are arrested for sleeping on the street. So watching the way, somebody joked to send them to Alligator Alcatraz, but that's the next step, is more camps, send them there. And on top of that, they're talking about, oh, and by the way, we're going to assess the neighborhoods and those that we think are the worst. We're just going to clear them out. Okay? We're just going to clear them out. Now, I'm not going to do like a show of hands to determine if I'm actually the oldest person in here. That would not be nice. And if I am, I don't want to know. But I'm old enough to have remembered, not just before the Vietnam War and the start of the Vietnam War, I I'm old enough to remember the civil rights movement, the war on poverty, and all these, but also when they decided we're going to put all these people that are in mental institutes out on the street, we thought it was a good idea, you know, all these different things. And I've seen this stuff over and over, and what's going on right now with Donald Trump is the culmination of things that have been going on since before the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Before the Vietnam War, before. And the bad guys have gotten in charge.
Yes.
And they are doubling down. And, you know, it's a quarter to midnight. We got to get to work.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you guys look around the room, if I could just have you all read the signs that you see. Protect our checks. Wow, you guys aren't even trying. Okay, let's try that again. If you could read what's on the wall. Protect our checks. Let's do that again, a little bit louder. Yes. Now, on your tables, you see some signs. If I could have you all raise those signs. And what are we doing today? Protect our checks. Y'all are right. A little bit louder. Protect our checks. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you at the next event.